I walked into my historic Denver brownstone to the sound of my life shattering literally. The crash of drywall dust coated the air like snow. I stood in the doorway, my suitcase dropping from my hand, watching my father and brother swing sledgehammers into the glass walls of my custom sunroom, my sanctuary. My father did not even stop swinging when he saw me. He just laughed, looking over his shoulder at my brother. "She will not kick out a pregnant woman," he said. He was wrong. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. My pulse did not even spike. In my line of work, when a structure is compromised, you do not mourn the rubble, you assess the liability. I stepped back into the winter air, the cold hitting my face like a slap, and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady as I dialed 911. "I need to report a felony burglary in progress," I said, my voice calm, almost clinical. "Two men have broken into my home and are destroying the property. Yes, I am safe. No, they are not aware I have called." I watched through the front window as the patrol cars arrived, silent at first, then bursting with blue and red lights that painted the snow in violent colors. Officers stormed the house, guns drawn, shouting commands that cut through the noise of the sledgehammers. "Get on the ground now." My father dropped his tool, looking more annoyed than afraid. My brother Austin froze his eyes wide as he realized this. It was not a family dispute. This was the law. I watched them being forced to the floor amidst the dust of my broken walls, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. When the officers brought me inside to verify my identity, the air was thick with white powder. It coated everything, my vintage rugs, my books, my plants. It settled in my throat like ash. "This is a misunderstanding, officer," my father said, trying to stand up, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used to control everyone. "We are her family, she knows. We are here." I looked at the officer, then at my father. "I do not know these men," I said. "They have no permission to be here. They have destroyed my property. I want to press charges." My father's face went purple. "Natalie, stop this nonsense right now. You are embarrassing yourself. Tell them the truth." "I am telling the truth," I said, turning my back on him. I showed the officers my deed, my identification, the time-stamped flight itinerary proving I had just landed. The officer nodded, his expression hardening as he looked back at my father. "You are under arrest for felony property destruction and breaking and entering," the officer said. As they dragged them out, my mother's car screeched into the driveway. She ran up the steps screaming my name. "How could you? They are your family." I looked at her, then at the ruins of my sunroom. This was not just property damage. This was biological warfare. My home was my skin, the only layer of protection I had against the world. They had not just broken a wall. They had violated my sanctuary, proving once and for all that to them I had no boundaries. They were bound to respect. I looked at the officer. "Her too," I said. "She is the getaway driver." The officer hesitated, but I stood my ground. "She knew they were here. She is an accomplice." As they put my mother in the back of a second cruiser, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was the feeling of a heavy, suffocating weight finally being lifted. I stood in the wreckage of my home, the cold winter wind blowing through the hole in my wall, and for the first time in years I felt entirely, terrifyingly free. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. I walked through the debris, my boots crunching on broken glass and plaster. The cold Denver wind whistled through the gaping hole where my sunroom used to be, carrying with it the smell of snow and ruin. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself, but the chill was coming from inside me. This brownstone was not just a house, it was my history. I bought it 5 years ago when it was a dilapidated wreck that everyone said should be torn down. I spent my nights sanding floors until my hands bled. I spent my weekends hunting for period-correct fixtures and salvage yards. I restored it brick by brick while my parents called it a money pit and laughed at my ambition. And now they had taken a sledgehammer to it. I went into my office, the only room that was untouched, and opened my laptop. I didn't waste energy on tears. I treated the betrayal like a blighted elm. Isolate, identify, remove. I opened a spreadsheet I had named the Austin Fund. It was a document I had kept hidden even from myself. A record of every time I had bylaid my brother out. $88,000. That was the number staring back at me. $88,000 in loans for startups that never started, for emergencies that were always self-inflicted, for rent he couldn't pay because he was too good for a normal job. I scrolled through the dates and amounts, feeling a nausea that had nothing to do with the dust in the air. Why had I done it? Why had I kept giving him money when I knew he would never pay it back? I looked at the total again, and the realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't because I believed in him. It wasn't because I thought this time would be different. I kept paying him because I was trapped in the sunk cost fallacy of blood. I had invested so much love, so much hope, so much money into my relationship with my brother that walking away felt like admitting Defeat, it meant admitting that the first 10,000, the first 20,000, the first 50,000 were all wasted. It meant admitting that my investment in my family was a total loss. So I kept throwing good money after bad, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if I gave a little more, he would finally become the brother I wanted him to be. I was gambling on a relationship that didn't exist, playing a slot machine that was rigged against me, praying for a jackpot that was never going to come. I looked around my ruined home at the destruction. They had wrought in less than an hour. They hadn't just broken a wall, they had broken the spell. The $88,000 was gone, the relationship was gone, and my house, my beautiful historic home, was wounded. But as I stared at the spreadsheet, a cold resolve settled over me. I wasn't going to throw any more good money after bad. I was closing the account permanently. I hit save on the spreadsheet, then opened a new document. This one I named Evidence. I started typing, documenting every detail of the break-in, every threat, every dollar stolen. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a war. And I had just realized that I was the only one who had been fighting with one hand tied behind my back. Now the gloves were coming off. I wasn't just going to rebuild my wall. I was going to build a fortress, and they were going to pay for every single brick. My parents posted bail for themselves and Austin the next morning. I found out because my phone started vibrating on the desk like an angry insect, buzzing incessantly with notifications. I didn't pick it up. I let it dance across the wood, watching the screen light up with messages from my mother, Christina. When the buzzing finally stopped, I picked it up and scrolled through the texts. No apologies, no explanations, just a barrage of images, ultrasound photos, grainy black and white pictures of a fetus curled up and defenseless. Then came the text, "This is your niece. She was going to sleep in that room. You threw her out into the snow." I stared at the screen, feeling a cold knot of nausea in my stomach. It was brilliant, really. They were weaponizing the womb. They were using an unborn child as a human shield, daring me to attack. They knew that no matter what they had done, no matter how much money they had stolen or how many walls they had broken, the world would see a pregnant woman and a baby, and I would be the monster. I opened Facebook. My mother had already posted a long, tearful status update. "Pray for our family." It read, "Our daughter Natalie had us arrested for trying to help her brother build a nursery. She threw her own unborn niece onto the street in the middle of winter. We are heartbroken." The comments were already pouring in. "How could she? That's evil. Family is everything. Karma will get her." My brother Austin had sent me a direct message. "My lawyer says I can sue you for emotional distress. You traumatized Olivia. If anything happens to the baby, it's on you." I put the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered street. The guilt was suffocating. It pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Was I wrong? Was I cruel? It was just a room. It was just money. Maybe I should have just let them stay. Maybe I should have just let them take it. But then I stopped. I took a deep breath and forced myself to look at the situation clearly. I dissected the texts like a forensic accountant. I broke down the emotional manipulation into its component parts. Fear, obligation, guilt, the faux they were using fear, the threat of public shame, the threat of legal action. They were using obligation, the idea that family owes family everything no matter the cost, and they were using guilt, the weaponized image of an innocent baby, but none of it was real. My mother wasn't asking for help. She was daring me to be the villain. She was counting on my fear of looking like a monster to force me back into compliance. She was betting that I would rather be used than be hated. But she was wrong. I looked at the broken wall again, at the cold air seeping into my home. I wasn't the villain. I was the victim who had finally decided to fight back, and I wasn't going to let them use an innocent child to protect themselves from the consequences of their own actions. I picked up my phone and took a screenshot of my mother's post. Then I took a screenshot of the police report. I didn't post them, not yet. I just saved them into a folder labeled Evidence. Then I texted my contractor. "I need a forensic damage assessment today." This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a war, and I was done fighting with my heart. From now on, I was fighting with my head. I treated my house like a crime scene. I hired a forensic contractor, a man named Marcus, who specialized in insurance claims and structural damage. He walked through the rubble with a clipboard, taking measurements, tapping on the remaining studs, shaking his head at the amateurish destruction. "This is going to cost you," he said. "The plaster alone is historic. You can't just patch it, you have to restore it." I nodded, writing down the figures he quoted me. 50,000, 60,000, maybe more. I added it to my spreadsheet. Every cent, every hour of my time, every sleepless night. Then Marcus stopped. He was looking at a pile of paperwork I had pulled from the county records office earlier that morning. "Wait a minute," he said, frowning. "Where is the permit?" "I don't have a permit," I said. "I didn't authorize this." No, I mean the permit for the loan. He pointed to a document. Hadn't looked at closely yet. This says there was a $50,000 home improvement loan taken out against the property last month. The work order references this address. I froze. A loan? I hadn't taken out a loan. I didn't need a loan. My house was paid for. I grabbed the paper from him. It was a copy of a loan agreement from a local credit union. The borrower was listed as Natalie Vance. The address was correct. The amount was $50,000. And at the bottom of the page in ink that looked disturbingly familiar was my signature. I stared at it, my mind racing. The date next to the signature was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago I was in London presenting a design proposal for a new botanical garden. I had the passport stamps to prove it. I couldn't have signed this document. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. This wasn't just my parents breaking in. This wasn't just my brother being entitled. This was identity theft. This was bank fraud. I looked closer at the witness signature. Kenneth Vance, my father. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. Austin hadn't just decided to build a nursery. He had financed it by stealing my identity, forging my signature, and taking out a loan against my own house. And my father had helped him do it. They had stolen $50,000 from me before they ever picked up a sledgehammer. They had mortgaged my future to pay for their golden child's present. I looked at Marcus. I need you to document everything I said, my voice trembling with a rage so cold it burned. Every nail, every scratch, every lie. I took the loan document and added it to my evidence folder. It was the final nail in the coffin. The family dispute was over. The criminal investigation had just begun. 2 days later my father called. He didn't yell. He sounded reasonable, almost calm. He said they wanted to meet to smooth things over. He said Austin had left some expensive tools in the sunroom and just wanted to collect them. He said they were willing to pay for the repairs if I dropped the charges. I agreed. I told him to meet me at a neutral location to sign an agreement. I gave him the address of a building downtown. When they arrived, my father, mother, and Austin walked in with confident strides. Austin was even smirking, probably thinking he had won again. He had brought Olivia with him, likely as a prop to garner sympathy. She looked tired, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. They walked into the conference room I had directed them to. My father sat down at the head of the table, ready to dictate terms, so he started. We are glad you came to your senses. I didn't sit. I stood by the door and watched them get comfortable. Then I slid a single piece of paper across the polished wood table. What is this? My father asked, picking it up. It is the loan agreement, I said. The one Austin took out in my name, the one you witnessed. My father went still. Austin stopped smirking. You forged my signature, I said, my voice quiet but echoing in the room. You stole my identity. You committed bank fraud. That is not a family misunderstanding. That is a federal crime. My mother stood up. Natalie, please, we can fix this. We can pay it back. No, you can't, I said, because I have already given this document to the detectives waiting in the next room. At that moment, the door behind me opened. 2 detectives walked in their badges, glinting under the fluorescent lights. Austin scrambled up, panic, finally replacing his arrogance. Dad, do something, but my father couldn't do anything. He was staring at the handcuffs the detective was pulling from his belt. Kenneth Vance, Austin Vance, you are under arrest for identity theft, bank fraud, and conspiracy. The detective said as they were handcuffed, the room filled with the sounds of their protests. They're begging. Austin was crying now. Loud, ugly sobs about his baby, about how he couldn't go to jail. My mother was screaming at me, calling me a traitor. I looked at Olivia. She was standing in the corner, frozen, her face pale. She looked from Austin to me, her eyes wide with terror. I walked over to her. I reached into my purse and pulled out a pamphlet I had picked up earlier. It was for a women's shelter that specialized in helping victims of financial abuse. They lied to you too, I said softly, pressing it into her hand. He doesn't have any money. He stole it from me. If you stay with them, they will drag you down too. Run. She looked at the pamphlet, then at Austin. Being dragged out the door, she didn't say a word. She just nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks, and walked out of the room, away from them. I watched the detectives lead my father and brother away. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock snapping shut. It was the sound of a door closing forever. And as I stood alone in the empty conference room, I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. It has been 6 months since I last saw my family in that conference room. 6 months of silence, 6 months of peace. My sunroom is finished now. I hired a new contractor, a man who respected the history of the house, and we rebuilt it better than before. The glass is triple-paned, designed to withstand Denver winters. The floor is heated. I filled it with rare tropical plants, creating a living, breathing ecosystem that thrives under my care. It is a greenhouse in the truest sense, A place where I control the climate, where I decide what grows and what gets pruned. Austin is currently serving a 3-year sentence in federal prison for bank fraud and identity theft. My parents lost their home. They had to sell it to pay for Austin's legal defense and the restitution ordered by the court. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they are renting a small apartment on the outskirts of town. I don't know the address and I don't want to know. I deleted the contact group labeled family from my phone the day after the arrest. It was a small action, just a tap of a screen. But it felt like cutting an anchor loose. I didn't block them, I just erased them. They are no longer a part of my digital landscape, just as they are no longer a part of my life. Sometimes late at night I think about Olivia. I heard she moved back to her parents' house in Ohio. I hope she's okay. I hope she realizes that leaving was the bravest thing she could have done for her child. I saved her from a lifetime of being used, even if she hates me for how I did it. That is a burden I am willing to carry. I sit in my sunroom now, drinking tea and watching the snow fall outside. The white flakes settle on the glass roof, insulating me from the cold. For years I thought family was something you were born into, a debt you had to pay for the rest of your life. I thought love was transaction and loyalty was obligation. But as I look around at the life I have rebuilt, at the thriving plants, the restored walls, the quiet stability, I realize the truth. Family isn't biology. Biology is an accident. Family is a choice. It is the people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your success without jealousy, who don't break into your home to steal your future. I had to cut the rot to save the tree. It was a painful surgery and the scars are still there, hidden under the fresh paint. But the tree is alive. It is growing. And for the first time in my life, its roots are deep and its branches are free. If you had to choose between your peace and your family's demands, which would you pick? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more stories of justice.